think that that's why it's important, in my mind, to have more women in the hierarchical structure of the church, because we do ask different questions.
We do.
And we see things and experience things in such a different way. So how do you feel about that?
Awesome.
Let me just step aside.
What are you doing up here anyway? Who invited you? Honestly. Do you think you're in charge?
I did have a young woman say, it's really hard for me to watch General Conference and see 8 women up there.
For sure. So I'm going to do maybe I'll explain a couple things. I'm going to go back to the other thing that you were saying, Bill, about the church structure and the family structure. When we see today President Nelson clearly making a stronger emphasis than ever on the family, and then we see President Eyring saying to the women of the church, he's defining nurturing, and one of the things he says for nurturing is the woman's primary responsibility for nurturing is to be the primary gospel instructor in the family. That's a huge change that many people did not recognize, and I think if more women understood that, he is saying in the home, women, you need to be stepping up to the plate. It's very hard to be the primary gospel instructor in your home if you don't know the gospel. So he's asking the women of the church to step it up. And does that mean that men also are not? No, and I'm going to say this until I'm blue in the face. It is not a competition. We are working together, men and women, always, and the more men and women work together with the Spirit, the more synergy there is, and the more we're going to be able to create a sin-resistant and a strong covenant people, right? Eventually, as Elder Ballard says, and I say it in this book, I quote him in this book, he says that the church is a framework that is eventually going to fall. And in the eternities, in the next life, what we will have is families. And so I know that it's hard right now for a lot of people because they see this public structure of the church. But what is most significant, and again, if we could focus on the temple, if we could focus on the family, it would be women, your responsibility as mothers. And I don't just mean mothers who have children. I consider myself a mother and I have no children. But I consider myself, and I've considered myself a mother for a long time, because I care about the gospel, and I care about nurturing people, and I care about saving souls. So I'm a mother. And I try to mother, and I try to nurture. So one thing we can do, I think, is help the young women go against the natural culture of our day and the natural world and say, okay, first of all, let's really focus on family, and let's focus on temple, and let's focus on your primary responsibility, and let's make that awesome. Like, let's make that so amazing, right? So I think that's one. But then I also say, the Lord structured his hierarchical structure of the church on that way, and I don't know why. But there have been a number of changes recently that have allowed women to be more visible, more vocal, more validated. We see women on the stand, we see women speaking more, we see women praying, we see women as witnesses and things of that nature. And you know what? It took, Moses how many years to cross the wilderness? And I'm not saying that it's ever going to change and that women will be ordained to a priesthood office. I have no idea. For me, it's a leaf on the tree. But what I do know is that we have a prophet today, and we've had prophets for years who have loved, adored, and really tried to help women reach their own potential. It's like you were saying with Heavenly Mother, I think, a little bit. With Heavenly Mother wants the women to be able to gain that knowledge to become like her. If we haven't noticed this, sisters, I'll speak to you for a second. The brethren are pleading with the sisters, literally using that word to figure it out. And the sisters are waiting for the brethren to figure it out. But the brethren are pleading with the sisters to do it. So sisters, if you're not doing it, whose fault is it? And I don't mean to be mean to the sisters by saying that, but I'm gonna put ownership a little bit where it needs to be. If you're waiting for the men to figure everything out and change everything, I'm not saying that you should be writing to the prophet and say this is what needs to change. But if you're not studying the priesthood like he's asking us to do, and if you're not taking that role as a primary religious leader or primary religious educator or whatever I just said in your home, and if you're not taking the role that the brethren are pleading with the women to take, then the Lord can't give us more than we're willing to accept. And so we have to accept more. So I'm just throwing that out there. I personally believe in my many conversations with many women, when women get together and talk about the priesthood, the Lord reveals truth to women in magnificent, incredible, amazing ways. And they're not getting ahead of the brethren. The brethren, if you haven't noticed, President Nelson is just right there. And the women are following along. But I've also noticed women are understanding the priesthood in some ways better than they ever have before, and are having conversations in new ways, and are actually using the priesthood and teaching it differently than they have before. But it is difficult for these young women, there's no question. And I will say this, too. I'm blabbing a lot, but I guess I'm supposed to be. So,
Yeah, it's okay to ask them questions too.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
We yes, we need to also be authentic with the young women and say it's hard. Like it's to just say no, don't worry about it. It's nothing. Don't think about it. That you'll figure it out someday. No. Young women, it is hard. We don't live in that society. We live in a different society. We live in a society where women are supposed to be doing everything and have everything, and it seems unfair. And yes, right now, I don't have all the answers, but I understand that it's hard, and I understand, and can we talk about it more, and can you help me understand more of how you're feeling and see if I can help? Or if nothing else, I may not have any answers at all, but let me walk beside you. Let me be a part of this, and let me understand, and let me help you to know that it's a struggle, and it's real for some sisters. And although I don't have the answers, I'm right here with you. And feel free to cry on your pillow all you want. I'll cry with you too. You know what I mean? But it's all true. The church is still true. I don't have all the answers, but I love you.
Yeah.
So we're in this interesting transitional phase. It seems to me like we're struggling with our language a little bit. You've brought a few, like, and you state in the book, even I think Brother and Sister Renlund brought out that we're confused about what priesthood means.
Yeah.
Like genuinely confused.
Yeah.
This is going to be an interesting transition.
It is,
Using
I
our
agree.
we have a native language that we've
Yeah.
inherited, and it gets a little confusing. But I think one thing that you've really done in this book is you've said there's like, so this priesthood, this covenantal priesthood, familial priesthood, that's the eternal one.
Yes.
The one that we talk about all the time is the hierarchical one that relates to the church, which is temporary. The church itself is temporary.
It is.
And by the way, I've noticed that we should have all noticed by now that we're de-emphasizing church in favor of temple and family now.
Amen.
Like we're cutting back,
More and more.
right? Like
Yep.
sooner or later.
1 hour church, baby.
Let's see where. 1 hour church. Can we get to show
Just
of hands?
saying. Come to our house.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. We don't even go to church. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Sorry, guys. Sorry, sweetie. Sorry.
Now I lost my train of thought.
I'm really sorry.
She'll be here all night.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, but I think it's important. So we have, by the way, I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but we have a distinctly male way of talking about priesthood. We're talking about
Yes,
we
I
talk about
noticed.
holding it,
Yes.
using it like it's a tool we pick up off the
Yes.
shelf. So
Yes.
we've made priesthood like an object.
Yes.
Instead of like this covenantal relationship, we made it an object that we grab, we can use it, put it back on that shelf. Okay, so I think the way it's ingrained into our conversation. I think one of the things your book does is start to shift, challenge our vocabulary, and say some of this is just cultural baggage that we have brought to these eternal concepts. We need to kind of maybe start separating that a little bit and see what the deep reality is behind it.
I agree, and frankly, that's part of the plea, I think, for President Nelson. Men talk differently than women do. I mean, there's just... I know there are so many studies and gender studies, and I did a lot of this in my postgraduate work and things. But I'm still just going to say, men talk about the priesthood differently than women do. I've talked to so many men and so many women. Women are embracing priesthood. Men are holding priesthood. I mean, it's just
For women, it's something almost like flows through you, and for men, it is a tool. But it does make sense because we do, like in the hierarchical priesthood, if that's what we're talking about. There are keys. That is like
there's a
something.
Terminology.
There's
exactly.
That
but there really isn't. But there is.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's what we've made it to be, even though.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
But
the
you
scripture
hold
said that.
callings, or you, But
the key of knowledge is a temple thing, and you don't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's why it's, even when you think about Section 84, which President Nelson has just asked all of the sisters to study, in there we have the key of knowledge, and that's something every sister of the church can have, and you don't. That's not. It's different. Like it's a different way of using a key. Sorry, I
just give us our
interrupted
tools.
you.
Nobody wants our tools. We're going to just do it.
Exactly. Yes. And we are trying to become it.
Yeah, well, I was asked to give a talk in church about the priesthood and women, which was really hard for me. And so I wrote it up. I really labored over it, and I went over to my dad's house and kind of read it to him, and he was so kind and gracious, but he said...
I'm her dad, by the way.
Yeah.
You're so kind and gracious.
But he did say, you're talking about the priesthood the way a man would talk about the priesthood.
Yeah.
And he kind of pointed that out, and he challenged me. He said, you need to create your own vocabulary for what you experience.
That's good.
And it was like at 8 o'clock at night, and I started crying. And I went home and prayed, and I think that was a real turning point in my life.
That's great.
because I was able to put words to it, and it was something like that I saw as I was more of a vessel for that power. And I feel like I used to pray, and it was like I would pray to God and then hope that he would bless whatever I was praying for.
Yeah.
And it kind of, I had like this shift of, I'm actually part of the process of God's power flowing through me to my child, or to the food that I'm blessing, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it has been significant for me, and I've had really cool experiences with that.
What experiences have you had?
Well, I mean, just the other day, my son was having night terrors. And so he was shaking and he was tense, and he came and he just, I can't sleep. So I had him kneel down by me, and I held his little hands, and I just started praying for him in my mind. But I started like in his crown, and it just kind of came to me what he was feeling. So I asked God to take away the fear and the anxiousness, and I went to his throat, and I could actually it was like inspiration. I knew what he needed.
Yeah.
And asked for God to bless him with the things that he needed. And it was probably like a 10-minute prayer, which is kind of long, and it was just like this vibration that I could feel. I don't know how else to describe it, but I could feel energy rushing through me, and he could feel it. And at the end of the prayer, he just like fell into my arms, and he was limp, and just his heart wasn't beating so fast, and I knew that it was God's power, right? Yeah. And I just I think before, like when I was on my mission, it was like almost like this anxiety of like, God, please bless this person to show up to church. And it was like I didn't feel part of the process. It was just kind of like a plea, and I didn't feel connected to it. But I feel like I'm kind of feeling that now of like if I am a pure vessel, I can be that kind of conduit for his power.
So, okay, that was awesome.
Yep.
So April 2018 General Conference, President Nelson talked to the men, and he asked the men to live up to their priesthood privileges. And he said, too many men are giving blessings, right? Too many men are giving prayers, offering prayers, and are not giving blessings. And in that same talk, he quotes section 84, 18 through 21, I think on that one, or maybe it's 18 through 23. And then he says, and women are not receiving their priesthood privileges either. Mm. And what you just explained is almost to the T what President Nelson was telling the men that they were not doing. And he's also in that same talk saying, women, you also are not doing it. It's kind of it's interesting to hear you express exactly what he told the men that they weren't getting in your world. And now in 2019, he's saying to the women, you need to understand, and he actually says, you need to study the priesthood power that you have been endowed with. Yeah. And then he says, and as you do so, it will change your life. So the prophet of the church this year is asking you to do what you have already learned. And now he's actually saying, do it more. Figure it out more, and it'll change your life, and it'll change the world. The prophecies have been there. President Kimball was prophesying about the women in our day back in the 1970s, and President Nelson has said, now we need to be doing this. And what you're exactly describing is true. And if more women were thinking about it in those terms, and trying to, I think what President Nelson is trying to do, as you notice, he's not giving the answers, but he's asking the questions, and he's asking women to figure out the answers. And I really do believe that President Nelson is in a sense, almost depending on the women to figure it out. He's not going to give it to us. I really don't believe, and I don't know that the Lord has given it to him necessarily. I don't mean to in any way demean him. I think the Lord is giving him, as a prophet, the responsibility to get the women to figure it out and to use it. So yes, I think that answer is spot on. And it's beautiful. And I think we can all be doing that better.